I expect every single big name patriot to be there on Saturday, 25th of October, for our crusade through Whitechapel. Well, this is a holy war.
Even if you don't come today, we stand firm to let them know that if you come, anytime, we will stand firm, anytime, and we will be ready to defend our masajid, to defend our elders, to defend our women, to defend our community.
Welcome to a special episode on the aftermath of a very peaceful protest that happened on Saturday, the counter-protest, where we are really thwarting fascism. Somehow, we've got in the papers as being fascists ourselves, Islamists. I have two, and I don't mean it by the slightest, I have two special people with me today. They are the organising members of the committee that actually organised the counter-protest against fascists. And I want to add a bit more and call them illiterates. Thank you very much, Brother Shukur, for coming on. This brother has specifically asked me to keep his name anonymous for many reasons, so he's going to keep his anonymity. Today we're going to discuss a plethora of things. The first thing we're going to discuss is what happened in that march, the intricacies, how it was prepared, all of the rules that everyone adhered to. Bear in mind, there was not one crime committed in that march, albeit somehow wearing balaclavas has turned illegal. We've been weaponized in that way. We're also going to cover the topics of criticisms, and unfortunately, and this has dismayed me, we've had people from within our community criticizing us when, you know, in the past, fascists have come and slapped them up and they haven't said nothing about that. So we've had young men, including everyone here, that peacefully protested on that march, being criticized by our own community. Shame on them, and we'll be addressing that. We're addressing all the other criticisms as well. But the reason I've brought these two esteemed guests on today is to understand the dynamics and the inner workings of how the march took place, the intricacies of it, how they ensured that no one broke the law, and most importantly, and this is the thing, we've been marginalized, we've been villainized, you name it, you know, Islamists, fanatics, fascists, we're righter than far right. These brothers have put in a great deal of effort and organisation to ensure that everyone represented Islam and our people in this country. Lastly, Tower Hamlets. This is the prize for all the far right. I mean, it has a long history of the fascists and the right wing coming here and fighting. And ultimately, East London is known, and more specifically, Tower Hamlets is known for resisting. And I think Tower Hamlets, I can say this with my chest held high, that Tower Hamlets is an embodiment of the rest of the Muslim country. Well, when I say Muslim, that's going to sound controversial. The rest of the Muslim enclaves and diaspora around the country. So we've got Luton and further afield. And they look to us to restore and ensure safety for our people. And also they look to us and see how we behave. So we were representing on multiple fronts. I'm going to introduce the brother that wants to stay anonymous. Thank you very much for coming on.
Welcome.
Salam. I think you did a great job alongside all the other members in organising this march. Let's talk about the Holy War. Let's talk about the Islamists, and let's talk about the outsiders.
So I think, to start off with, I think the very first time I saw a video by a man called Nick Tanconi, the leader of the United Kingdom Independence Party, was absolutely terrifying. So when I saw it, you know, he asked people to bring out their crosses. He asked people to come and engage in a holy war, talking about defense. And when you're talking a holy war, essentially what you're talking about is a crusade. And if you look up the definition of a holy war, what are we talking about? You know, when the Christian empires had come and attacked, you know, Muslim empires. So I think when we look at that, you know, and that is something that was said that was completely unprovoked. And you know, I didn't know of Nick Tanconi until that video. He was as irrelevant, you know, as a piece of rice falling on the floor. So I think he brought himself to the limelight. But obviously, when you're a leader of a political party and you say something as inflammatory as that, and actually as terrifying as that, because it terrified a lot of people in our borough. whether it was different ethnicities or religions or backgrounds or whatever. I think that really put the fear into people, that thinking, okay, there is a group out there, there's a political party out there, something where Nigel Farage actually comes from, who's now tries to kind of water himself down a little bit and talking about immigration.
He's
But
mainstream now.
absolutely,
Yeah.
you know, but even then, he's having a hard time doing that. But I think when someone like Nick Tanconi comes out and says those kind of things, I think it's terrifying for us to hear the words crusade and a holy war, and it's one of those things, really. You know, I wonder, as a brown man, you know, as someone of a Muslim background, someone that attends mosque once in a while, and someone that, you know, can use, you know, sort of, you know, Islamic language, you know, whether I say inshallah or bismillah, you know, like, what does that look like? You know, if I came out and I said, you know what, let me go on a holy war in Essex somewhere.
Not holy war, jihad.
Jihad. Like, let's use our term.
Yeah, let's use our term, yeah.
So if I said something like that, what does that look like? You know?
MI5,
Yeah, absolutely.
Schedule 7.
Prevent, you know, and getting ransacked
Yeah.
completely.
Yeah.
You know, I'd probably be out of a job next week.
Yeah, it's true.
So I think, well, when that kind of terminology is used and it's gone without any notice, but the moment the community that's being provoked, the community that's being poked, I mean, we didn't really rise up to the provocation. We came out and protested as any community would when someone says something. But when you rise up against it and when you stand firm in your own home, somehow that has flipped as how terrifying that looks. How terrified do you think we were when you were talking about a holy war?
Very good point, yeah.
Yeah.
We are still the minorities in this country, thanks. Brother Shukur, just latching onto that, if I were to summarise, this Tenkuni or whatever his name is, this irrelevant specimen, he wanted to purge our streets of our businesses, of our people. We haven't done anything to him. Do you want to add on that?
Yeah, I think just a couple of points, really. I think first and foremost, you're correct in that. Up until a few weeks ago, I mean, I myself, I'm familiar with the UKIP and the UK Independence Party. I think it was Robert Kilroy Silk that originally founded it.
He was a talk show host, wasn't he?
Yeah, that's right. As a talk show host, and he made some racist remarks, I think, and then eventually he got the boot and he decided to go into politics. So up until a few weeks ago, I myself hadn't heard of Nick Tanconi. But what struck me the most was how emboldened somebody can be in this day and age, where after all the struggles and all the kind of efforts everybody has put in, not just Asians or the black section of the community or minority communities, but as a collective British society as a whole, we have moved miles from the 60s and the 70s, so we thought. But it almost feels like we've done a 360 on social cohesion, equalities, justice, and even the whole notion of right from wrong is almost being debated in certain corners. And I don't want to deviate from the main topic here, otherwise we could talk about this all day. But going back to the point, what struck me was how brazen and emboldened Nick Tanconi felt, where he could stand there and call members of the far right, the Christian community, the white community, and deliberately targeting a section of British society, Muslims, faith-based community, to come out with their crosses, to come out and crusade against Muslims, to do what he termed a mass deportation. I think all the things you can think of that you wouldn't ever want anybody to, you'd want it to stay in the mind of a racist in terms of suppressive and expressive thoughts.
How
suppressive.
insulted are you, you know, aside from the term that you have, a lovely term that you have, when you hear mass deportation? How long have you been in this country for?
My whole life. My grandfather came in the 20s.
Okay. If you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
Going to be 48.
Wow, very handsome.
Thank you.
So as a 40-year-old man, presuming that you're born here?
I came here when I was 4 years old.
4 years old. So you've been here 44 years. outlived all of us here in this studio now. How do you feel when another fellow man from the country that you grew up in, you went to the school, you did all of the things that ordinary British people do in being called an immigrant and that you should be deported? How did that make you feel?
I think I was horrified, absolutely horrified and disgusted, to be honest, and especially for somebody where we lived through the policy changes and the emergence of equalities policies and the establishment of the CRE, the Commission for Racial Equalities. So we were at the forefront. In some respects, we were the almost like the guinea pigs when the government was, or successive governments even, were trying to get a handle on racism and racial equalities and cohesion. So we grew up always believing that we need to prove ourselves. We need to almost demonstrate our loyalty to our country. And so I was horrified because I am somebody who, I strongly believe I am somebody who is integrated into society quite well. I'm a positive contributor to society. I try to lead by example. I try to take a stance against right from wrong. And I always challenge racism and discrimination in whichever shape or form.
My point
is
a man that's lived here for 44 years and as articulate as yourself, aside from the tan on your skin, how is it that you're an immigrant? How is it that you ought to be deported?
Well, I can't answer that purely because there is no. I think when certain things are put forward without any real solid basis, or anything we say, people of reason, anything they put forward has to have sound reasoning.
Right.
It is a baseless suggestion. And actually, no, why are we even rationalizing it? It's pure racism. That's it.
That's what I was looking
for. Pure
yeah.
racism.
Yeah.
Pure racism. So of course, when I heard that Nick Tenconi talking about this, I was disgusted. He talked about the Crusades, a new wave of Crusades against Muslims. Anybody who understands basic history, especially the Jewish and the Muslim community, we all know, and we found in textbooks, how that was a horrible period in history where Christian fanatics, in the name of religion, were persecuting, mass persecution of Jews and Muslims in Muslim land. We're not talking about in Christian Europe here. We're talking European Christians in Muslim land. And Jews and Muslims were the primary targets. So when you think of all of that, the only thing you can think of is this has to stop. At any cost, this needs to stop. And somebody is clearly allowing or giving this sort of rhetoric oxygen.
Well, there is an elephant in the room. I think it's Zionism. And I've heard that particularly Tommy Robinson has Zionist funders, and I think he's open about it. Thanks for that. I do want to move on to this brother here. A bit of a trivia question for you. What does Islamist mean to you? Islamist, what does that mean? I'm quite confused.
Well, so am I. I mean, I had to look up the definition after Saturday again.
Right.
To recognise, they're going around saying we're Islamists. So when I look at the definition, they're saying you're a fundamentalist or you're a little bit of an extra to it. So to me, I don't really recognise the word to begin with. So when they say Islamist, I don't feel like I need to actually answer the question and say, actually, I am or I'm not an Islamist, because that is an interpretation or a word that was created. And for me, I don't recognise the word. Now, if you're saying Islamic extremist, or if you say a Christian extremist or whatever, that makes a little bit more sense. But that word is actually preserved for Muslims.
Did you see any Islamist through their definition marching?
No. I mean, all the guys that coming along and all the families that were out there, I didn't see any sort of Islamist behaviour. If we're talking about a declaration of faith, if you're talking about your God is the greatest, I mean, is that really an Islamist thing? Is that being an extremist?
So are they saying, and forgive me for interrupting you, are they saying, for us saying Allahu Akbar, which means God is greater?
No, they're saying Allahu Akbar. That's what they're
right,
saying.
that's
Yeah,
what
that's
they're
what they're
saying.
saying.
Well, let me just correct them. Allahu Akbar doesn't mean God is the greatest. It means God is greater. God is greater than everything from your mindset, whatever you're thinking. So for us, and our fundamental human right in practicing what we've been instructed to practice, if that's Islamism or whatever they want to call it, surely that's another form of persecution.
You're absolutely, and I think the attempt is to shut the conversation down, and I'm in disbelief that we're even talking about Islamism or Islamist, because I don't think that's what it was what it was about. It was a Christian holy war
That's it.
coming to Whitechapel, and the response was a community standing firm. So we need to walk away from that Islamist or whatever word they've created. We need to walk away from that and really need to concentrate on the roots of where it comes from. And the roots of it is Christian extremism. So what is the word for that? I wonder. I mean, is there
I don't have to argue, are they even Christians? What was the last time they went to a church?
Absolutely.
I have another question for you. And now this, obviously, they're playing on the fears of the allegedly British people and where the scapegoats, obviously. But I think it's very important to address the women folk in your family, in my family, and everyone else across the country, Muslims. How petrified are they by the attacks that have been happening throughout this country up until the point Tenkunia, whatever his name is, incited a holy war?
I think people have been really frightened, particularly women. I think that fear isn't new. It's a fear that has existed over the decades. Now, whether we're talking about the late 70s or whether we're talking about the 80s or the 2000s, there is, over the last few decades, there's always been segments, in history where the far right have always tried to approach our people and strike fear. And actually, it was always the vulnerable that had to respond to that fear. It was always the vulnerable that couldn't make a stand, and it was always up to men at the time to come out and show some defiance. Now, over the years, as generations had grown, lots of our mothers and sisters have started to come out, but it doesn't stop the fact that they're scared to walk around in a hijab. It doesn't. When they're walking around in the evening or on their way home, that fear doesn't ever go away.
Particularly when, there's Muslim minorities across the country in towns and in the suburbs and in cities where it's not, there isn't an ethnic minority as of such. It's those people we're concerned about. Entire Hamlets, alhamdulillah, I'd like to think, obviously, we have a bit of a stain on us, embarrassing, because I've heard only recently, and I'm going to ask you about this anyway, that we've had racial attacks where you've had a group of white boys racially attacking a middle-aged man. So that's my concern, the fact that in the suburbs and where, Muslims are an extreme minority amongst the minorities. And to be fair, I'm not going to use hyperboles like GB News and mainstream media. I think most English people are educated. Well, when I say most, I'd say half, well, more than half, that are educated, law-abiding, middle-class citizens. But it's those that are at the fringe of society, can barely spell their own names, haven't got a pot to piss in. It's those that we need to be worried about, because it's those ones that they're not attacking men like you and I. You're quite stocky. I'm sure you can take a couple of them. But it's more that they're attacking elderly women, elderly men, our sisters, all of that sort of stuff. And that's the cowardice. And you and I can sit here and say, they're cowards. But how do you protect them if this is the narrative that they're stoking?
And I think when we're talking about protection, I think the short answer is whether it's an uncle that's walking to the masjid at night. Some years ago there was an uncle, what was his name, Muhammad Salim, who was attacked and who was actually murdered by someone that held far right views. And it was, at a time like that, it's really important for us to try and remember, how we approach these things. And I think it's moments like this that show unity and show force, and it shows who's actually on the ground and who's out there. And I'm actually grateful for the fact that an event like this has allowed us to be united, to be able to show that actually we need defense mechanisms. We need people out in the community that are out, that can actually defend our people. And I think when we talk about women and sisters and aunties, I think it's just, the same platform needs to be given to them. So when our menfolk are out in the community, it is up to us to be able to keep a lookout and actually as a community to be structured, and to be able to communicate with each other throughout.
Lastly, over the course of the last year, our sanctuaries, our masjids, mosques have been burnt down. There have been multiple arson attacks. There was one recently. I had a conversation the other day, and this arsonist burnt down an entire mosque. I'm not sure where it was precisely. We'll put it up, but he didn't know how many people were in there. That could have led to multiple dozens, if not hundreds, of fatalities. Unlike people that are so-called Christians, we frequent the masjid 5 times a day. Can you talk on that a bit?
I mean, God forbid. That was a man of another faith doing it to a church or a synagogue or whatever. And obviously, people are touching on the fact that that synagogue attack happened and so on. But actually, when we respond, when people are responding in such a way where they think, all right, let's make the first point of contact a masjid. And this isn't the first time actually. Last summer, not the summer that just gone. When we're talking about the Southport attacks, when those 3 innocent little girls were murdered,
Tragic, yeah.
By a youth, naturally this country for some reason turned against the Muslim faith. So mosque attacks are not something that's new or an attack in vengeance. It's always been the go-to point, and I think at the time, mosques that were being smashed up and so on. We really struggled with that. When we look around the world, and it's not just even this country. When we think about the New Zealand attacks, when that happened, for example, that was a massacre. That remained in the news for a little while, but it didn't really radicalize us. We thought about it, productively in terms of how we build sort of cohesion and how we approach things and how we work.
My argument would be, how can we build cohesion? I mean, from what you've just said and putting all of this in context, I myself, as a grown man, feel petrified.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's okay to feel petrified. And I think we strike a balance fairly. I think when there are communities out there that or an establishment out there that says to us that the moment we take a stand, actually we've got to watch our backs. We've got to think about the narrative that this country is taking. And I've been watching the news and reading articles over the last few days over a small march. Let's face it, around the world. This was a few thousand people that marched
at most, yeah.
On Whitechapel, and that was sensationalized to fit a narrative, in terms of the Islamists are taking over, and I think there are far right commentators out there, and I think Nixon, coming back to UKIP and Nick Coney, I think he realised that actually his United Kingdom Independence Party isn't enough. Isn't enough. So when he did the call out, he called out to all far right patriots, everyone with a platform. So he might as well have included Tommy Robinson, Nigel Farage, and that's what he was actually going for when he said, anyone that's a patriot, come to Hamlets, come to Whitechapel on that day. I mean, for him it was actually embarrassing. I think they had 75 people, and that embarrassment is not something he can walk away from.
I want to talk about the march and how it was set up. I think you guys did a fabulous, honestly, to get a group of young men below the age of 40 to be civilized and behave themselves with the context of what's been going on, the Holy War, the Crusade, let's purge them, you come out, you patriots. But prior to that, I want the audience to see something on the screen now, which actually on the day of recording, I think today is Wednesday, this footage came out today, and I want the audience to listen to it. And then we're going to talk on that, and then we're going to go into the intricacies and the ins and outs of what the dedication was, what sort of efforts were put in. So can you play this video, please?
Okay. No more protests. No more marches. No more stage. No more speakers. We need the English lads to make a point. A point that unfortunately has to be made.
Right. Brother Shukr, you watch that. You don't need an academic to interpret that as anything but incitement. No more protesting, no more marches. Let's get it on. That's what they're saying.
Right, and I think all of it kind of fits in with all the points that were being made before you played the video. I think if we look at the protests and the outcome of the protest and the subsequent criticisms, both from within and externally, from right-wing elements as well as the mainstream media, one thing is very obvious. Everybody is missing that key point, that the youth of Tower Hamlets, the community of Tower Hamlets, came out in defense of their faith and their dignity, and ultimately to protect themselves, property, persons, their neighbours. And I would go one step further and say, actually, in defense of British values, because it's enshrined in law. Everyone has a right to religious freedom, just the way everyone has a right to the freedom to protest. But nobody has the right to create hatred, division, or call for violence. Nobody from Tower Hamlets asked for this. We were told that they were coming. They didn't give us an option. They didn't say, would you like us to come? Would you like to lock horns with us? Do you want to go toe-to-toe with us? No, they imposed it on us. We're coming on the 24th, and they'll reclaim the streets.
And rid us of it.
And get rid us of it. Now, a couple of things. If you go back to the march on the day, most of the young men that were there, that stood outside the now town hall, was historically the Royal London Hospital. Most of those young men were born in that hospital.
Poignant, that's true.
Very important. And I'll come to that because I've had my conversations with some of these young people, because I wanted to understand, okay, we made a call and you responded, you came out, but what was it that really drove you to come out? And I wanted to understand that. And some of what I'm sharing is based on my conversations with them. That is a hospital where we were all born. Number two, when they marched westwards, towards the city, as in towards Altabali Park, they momentarily paused, and also there was a team that secured or surrounded the perimeter of the mosque. And I asked them, why is it so significant? We understand the sentiment around places of worship, not just for Muslims, for any religion, anybody who practices whichever faith. Said, because when I die, it's this building where I want my funeral to take place. And when they then continued to the park, westwards, Altabali Park, I asked them, do you know the significance of this park? They said, of course we do. And this is a question to your audience, really, or something for your audience to think about. Altabali Park was renamed after the first death of racist murder of the first British Bangladeshi on British soil. It used to be called Adler Street Park, which was then renamed Altabali Park. Now, if you just take this physical journey from the old hospital, Whitechapel, all the way to the Altabali Park, there is a racist, there's almost a granular chronology. Place of birth, place where I want to be offered my final rites, my funeral as a Muslim, and we congregate in the spot where the first British Bangladeshi was murdered. So the point is, all of this was driven by racist rhetoric and racist impositions. Everything that you're seeing now, and that video, I'm coming back to that point, absolutely disgusting. There is no other way to put it. But my challenge is to all the mainstream media outlets, all the critiques within our community, what do you say about that? And don't put that on the squarely blame our youth for this.
Just if I can interrupt, should he rally up whoever he rallies up and they come, those critiques or those people that are skeptical, all of them will run. It's very important that I say that. Those people that are saying, oh, this march didn't go well, and we're going to get to that, by the way. And I've spoke to you in private and I discussed it.
Cannon fodder.
Yeah, cannon fodder.
The word cannon fodder comes to
all
mind.
of them would run. All of them would run.
Of course,
not any of them would stand there and stand their ground.
And I agree with you. I second everything you say, because actually, if any of them have really lived and experienced discrimination the way most of us have, they would think twice before they criticize their own. I accept there's always room for improvement. That's why there's something called post-evaluation. We can take criticism, we can look at what went well, what could be improved. But what you don't do is try to discredit all of the effort, because generally it's very difficult to judge a person by their intention. So what is it that we do, any reasonable person? You judge a person or people by their action.
Apparent, yeah.
Yeah. So the action and the outcome of that day was what? 0 incidents of violence, 0 disorder, 0 arrests, which is very important because ultimately we were in constant liaison with the police throughout. And the police did tell us, if they get a whiff of potential disorder, they will impose a Section 60 where they will ask everybody present to remove their face coverings. The reason why the face coverings weren't removed is because there was no need for it. Face coverings per se, dressed in black per se, is not criminal. There is nothing against the law stopping us. That's why those young men chose to do that. Everyone had their reasons. I didn't have my face covering because I have reasons. I'm very confident and comfortable showing my face. But if somebody next to me has reasons not to, that's their prerogative. They're entitled to that. And as volunteers and coordinators calling on every section of the community to come out, I am not going, or none of us will disbar or bar somebody or disallow them to partake in something that they feel it is an obligation.
You would have no right to tell them.
We don't.
Yeah.
And the only thing we could cite is the law. But the law allows them to do that. And that's my point about fundamentally defending British values. They were, in my opinion, and we stood there defending British values. This is what British value is. Pluralism, inclusion, the right to exercise as long as my thoughts and actions do not cause harm to anybody. Nobody was harmed that day. Nobody was caused any alarm or distress. Anybody who says that is making it up. And that is an absolute fact. And here's the other thing. Text and context, it is paramount, especially now more than ever. Certain snippets of a massive event, certain snippets have been taken deliberately to fit a certain type of narrative, to deliberately mislead the British public. And I say this, all of us, most of us, if not all of us that were there on that day, we value Britishness and British values. And it is for those reasons that we are very fortunate, a population of about 68 billion in the UK.
Million, yep.
68 million.
Yep.
The Muslim population is about 4 million. And thank God, and I say alhamdulillah, praise be to Allah, that majority of British society are not racist, are not backwards, are not ignorant. And of course, the biggest price society pays for crime is the fear of crime. And they understand that so well. What this guy is doing is trying to play on people's fear. I don't know his name. I don't want to give him prominence by mentioning his name or asking for his name. But they are nobodies who are seeking attention, unfortunately, for the wrong reasons.
But we can't take this lightly. He's targeting us.
And
we can't take this lightly.
And that's it. Actually, I'm glad you said this.
We don't want a casualty.
In any protest, anybody who's been involved in protests, and the first time I attended a protest was when I was 9, just turning 10, the 10th death anniversary of Al-Tabali. That was my first protest I ever attended. Anybody who's been on protest will understand. The police defence is not a defensive line. That's a de facto safety line imposed by the state to ensure safety. If the police line is breached, and you look at every protest in history, in particular on British soil, once police lines are breached, what happens then? So really, that day, we were the first line and the last line of defence for our community. And I want to thank every single young person, those who covered their faces, those who didn't, but every person who turned up. I want to thank them because what they showed is courage. And what they showed is that there is no room for hatred. And when we reasserted, when the 1936 phrase that was coined, you know, the phrase that was coined, they shall not pass, when Oswald Mosley and his black shirt boys decided, we reasserted that. We reasserted that by not allowing them to pass. If they attended, they wouldn't have passed. And we made it very clear when we made the call out, we will hold the line. That's what we did. We held the line. And so things like that we don't take lightly, but we will not allow our communities to live in fear, because the biggest price society pay for crime is the fear of crime. And that is something we will not allow videos like that, actors and agitators like that, to act as catalysts to perpetuate and speed up the process of fear in our communities. We have always lived in fear. There's no denying. But that fear makes us vigilant, makes us more aware. We are not a passive community. We are not pacifists.
Beautifully put, Brother Shukr. I just want to put it in perspective. You're older than me. You're 44, I'm 32. We're from different generations. You may have grown up as a minority. I didn't. I grew up amongst majority Bengali, majority Muslims. Into Hamlets. And further afield. To be fair, I grew up until the bad boy age, and walked around with a chip on my shoulder. Didn't really bend down to anyone. So when we hear this, and I hear that, that's an imminent threat. To me, I understand your generation had to live in fear because you're we're no longer the minority. It's like for me making that video and saying, you know, I'm going to go to a certain area and watch out. Come on, boys, rally up, get your hammers and knives out, we're going out. They wouldn't take it, equally I wouldn't take it. I'm not saying I'm entitled, but I was born here.
And I can completely, I relate.
And the boys that came marching, and bear in mind, not one punch was thrown, not one crime was committed. Thank you very much, you guys. A lot of credit to you and the organising committee for ensuring that we behaved. Because we're civilised and we're Muslim, a lot was at stake. But it's remarkable. Usually when you see their marches, pissheads, yeah, get out of my country, yeah, pissing up the wall, can barely articulate a sentence together. None of that happened. None of that happened. So I can't say that we live in fear. I wasn't brought up to live in fear. Natural disposition of mine, I grew up, particularly into Hamlets and further afield, we grew up controlling things. And albeit it might be because we're the majority, but when you tell a person that is not used to fear, you have to be scared now, that person or that community are not going to take that lightly.
Of course not. And just on that, I just want to quickly kind of offer a further sort of flesh to the bones.
Yeah.
So despite being fearful of potential attacks every time we'd leave home to go to the school or pick up the groceries, it didn't stop us from living our life on our terms. And it didn't influence us to cause harm to others either.
Absolutely.
So it didn't turn us out to become racist in terms of brown on white violence or...
We're not racist.
But also, I'm also conscious of what I say because there are Muslim communities, extreme minorities living in remote parts of the country. So my message is twofold. One is that, no, despite, there is a potential, there's been an element of threat always as minorities,
Absolutely,
as Muslims. That was perpetuated further post 9/11. And we've seen how this community has been marginalised further, almost criminalised. It's almost where you have to justify your innocence first before anything else. So my message really is also to those remote sections of the country where extreme minority Muslims live, women, men. Yes, you will have to assess that, but don't let this stop you from living your life the way you need to. And certainly in Muslim majority areas, we don't take that lightly, but we we kind of, we're not dismissing it, but it won't stop us and make us think, oh, really, okay, we've got to do something about it. Because the reality is we're forever ready as a community. That's the point.
Beautifully put. Thank you very much. And just to finish this segment off, those men that did march, most of them, if not all of them, were born in this country. And the perspective that I've just explained is what they're thinking. They're not saying they're outsiders to this country. They went through the schooling system, they paid their taxes, they speak like you and I do, and all the rest of it, right? They're, unfortunately, because we're Muslim, right, there's things that we can't do. A lot of them are engaged in debauchery. That's the long and short of it. So you're calling these Islamists or people that are faithful people, a lot of them, and this is a ballpark figure, are engaged in debauchery, as is the way of British life, partying and etc., etc. Anyway, I don't want to digress. You've been waiting ever so patiently. I want to firstly thank E1, E2, E3, E14, all parts of London, and from the committee members that have advised me, specifically from Leicester, the brothers that turned up from Leicester, and really from all corners of this country, to help us and support us and stand with us. But one thing that I have to respect, and I haven't touched on it yet, is how you brothers, yourself, Brother Shukur, and some other members of the committee, how you got all of these areas together. That's a tall order. We've tried in the past for things like football and we can't get people. So,
well, I think you touched on your youth a little bit when you said you had a chip on your shoulder.
Yeah,
you know,
it's true
though. So I think during my youth, I was quite fluid. You know, in terms of going around different areas, having friends from different estates and so on. And I think over the years that works to advantage, as it did to lots of the brothers that were organising. And I think that's one of the shared things that we had in common. And you know, what we have within our structures, and I won't go into all the finer details of it, because I don't want geezers like that to kind of find out what we're on. But actually, I think what we've got is layers and structures amongst ourselves. You know, there are people that are leading, people that are on the periphery, people that are sort of immediate. And we've got different layers of generations with different kind of understanding. You know, lots of young people today might turn around and say, well, the older generations have become slightly soft and so on. But actually, there's wisdom behind sort of every generation. And you know, we take from, you know, post the murder of Al Tabali on the 4th of May, 1978, and how the community really quickly mobilised to show defiance in the face of racism. You know, and you know, Al Tabali is one murder of the 70s, but even sort of post millennium, we had the murder of a man called Shibli Rahman, sort of near the Devons Road area. Who was murdered by racists, and you know, some of them came out with a light touch in terms of manslaughter, and some of these people have really sort of come back into the community and held down jobs in the area. And I think over the years, whether it's per incident, per murder, the community has had to recognise, had to mobilise, and again and again. And over the years, you know, people like us, people like Shukur growing up, you know, we've been watching how that mobilisation works. And, you know, during my time, I remember actually it was June 2010 being assaulted by members of the English Defence League on Whitechapel.
You were assaulted?
Yeah, I was assaulted.
Oh.
So I remember hearing that. So I think it must have been a few weeks before the first protest that the far right were going to do in Tower Hamlets in many, many years, you know, because prior to that, you had things like Derek Beacon and the British National Party in 1993. But fast forward, that was my, you know, first experience of actually being attacked. I mean, I've been chased and hit and so on, but by white kids in the area before on the way to school. But this was the one that was really organised, and I think that made a lot of us think at the time, you know, how do we counter this? And it was up to us, and so we immediately created a network of people from different parts of the borough, and this is back in 2010. So this is social media was around then, but it wasn't as strong as it is now. You know, there was no TikTok, no Instagram, no mass sort of WhatsApp, and we went round and sort of created a bit of a database And you know, our community responded to that, and they responded really well. So whether now there was a an incident that happened in Whitechapel, or whether it was a mass demonstration that was about to take place, our community was responding, and we created something that was called Tower Hamlets Red Alert at the time, and it was to notify the community, not to say, look, come out and fight, but to let people know that we are expecting this or this has happened, and that would allow people like myself or Shukabai or others to be able to go home and say, Mum, Dad, you've got to be careful. Like, if you're going to go into Whitechapel Market today, you've got to be mindful, because some of these guys might come and ask you mock up questions in order to intimidate you. And I think those, throughout the years, those were segments that allowed us to do that. Even during the riots of 2011, we used that same blueprint in order to to protect our community. The riots weren't a racial tension on us, but actually it was the killing of a young man in North London that had triggered these riots, and it allowed us to actually use those blueprints, and we've been able to do it over the years. And I think, and I won't go into this too much because we're talking about Saturday's protest, but even when we're talking about sort of the issues that have been happening in Gaza, the genocide that's been happening in Gaza, we've used those same sort of principles in order to mobilize communities, and that has allowed us to build a network of people. And I think hence why when this threat of UKIP coming to Hamlets, coming to Whitechapel, it allowed us to go into different estates, hold meetings, have discussions with leads and so on, to bring on groups. And and I'm really glad that you touch on the sort of the behavior of our young people that came along, how disciplined they were. Not one punch was thrown, no one pissed on a wall, unlike others that we know that do when they go to demonstrations. But that didn't happen, and that comes with discipline, because there are respected people in place that everyone listens to. And I think relationships are vice versa. I think if there isn't respect, then you won't get the outcomes that you're looking for. And we didn't have a single act of disorder on the day. Now, whether it was walks, whether it was chants, there was nothing that was illegal. We obviously touched on that before. But I think previous structures have worked in our favour. And it was this time round that actually we realised, when you went and spoke to a young person, they were like, no way, they want to deport me, and
he's not be wise, he was born here.
Absolutely. And it was and actually it was confusion. Yeah. I'm like, why? What have we done? Yeah. And
deport him to where?
Yeah, exactly. So obviously Shukaway touched on, coming into the country as a young man. For me, that's a horror. I'm thinking I was born here. I was born in an NHS hospital. So where do you want me to deport? Where do you want to deport me to?
And for what reason?
Absolutely. And I think lots of these people that are out there saying that, I think classism in the UK plays a massive part of that. So there are racial elements, and there are people that are of a larger hierarchy, or higher up in the hierarchy rather, that play into it, because you can have sort of paternalistic racism, you can have xenophobia, you can have all of that, you can have that in your government, in institutions and so on. But actually, what you leave people with is what you touched on a little bit earlier. Actually, people that haven't really succeeded in life, that are really, really pissed off with people that are, because if you look at the statistics and you think about the education in this country, and you think about actually, I'm not even going to go into the wider arena, but talking just about Bangladeshi children, how they're progressing in this country, whether they come from households that sort of living in social housing or private housing or whatever, how they're excelling in education, and the importance that we give to that. And I think that really plays a part in it. And I think when we come back to mobilizing, it's understanding all the different layers of our children, because not all our children are sort of academics. You know, so, some are super skilled in different professions. And then you've got you know, other young people that are still trying to find their way. And if you understand that and you know how to bridge that gap, I think that really, really emphasizes on the kind of response you get.
I think beautifully put. I just want to touch on, yes, we're still, I think, socioeconomically disadvantaged. Hugely. A lot of us are from council estates. A lot of us, our parents, you know, they can barely speak English. You're probably first generation, right? Speaking second generation. Second generation. Could you imagine? Second generation. There's a lot of other ethnic minorities that are in third or fourth generation, particularly the Indian communities. But one thing that I think was very poignant there was the respect. So you've got the narrative that they're spinning off as us being delinquent. We haven't got our house in order. But if we didn't have our house in order, why is a scrawny-looking 18-year-old listening to you?
Absolutely, and I think it comes down to what you pass on, because I could, you know, for example, Shukra has now turned around and told some stories of his youth, and he, you know, the first time he went to a demonstration when he was about 10 years old, South Valley. Now, if I didn't know something like that and I didn't value it, then I can't carry on. I can't carry on with that. And I think per generation needs to be able to listen to our sound bites and kind of things we've experienced, and actually draw a parallel that actually, even though we're succeeding and we're doing a lot better, we're doing that on our own accord, not because the system's changing. The system's smarter, and as a result, we're getting smarter. You know, we're thinking of how to mobilize and how to ingrain ourselves. They talk about Islamism, right? So if, you know, for example, I took place in some sort of extreme thuggery in defense and went around knocking people out, whatever, I'd just be the thug. If I then took part in politics, for example, and decided to make changes to make my life comfortable, where does that leave me? You know, then it kind of, oh my God, this guy's out here to implement Sharia law. You know, so I think for us to find our sitting and our fitting. Now, if I come here, of course, you go home, you've got your corner you sit on, you know, you'll make that place nice. That's what we're trying to do. You know, the place that we are in, we are trying to make lives better for ourselves without affecting anyone, actually. And I think the scaremongering that takes place in society today is the same scaremongering that took place all those years ago. You know, like when we look into the, you know, I was around then, you know, in the 90s, you know, when we're talking about people protesting up and down Bethnal Green, Roman Road, with signboards that say rights for whites, you know, and you think actually that same narrative still exists today. You know, the BNP, I think in the early 90s, they were saying, well, if that means I'm racist, well, I'm proud to be a racist. That was broadcast on national telly. So I think just because they've gotten smarter, I don't think that we need to try and tone ourselves down. You know, so what if we've come out in some black outfit or whatever? We are within our legal rights to do that. And I think Shukabai touched on it. Those are British values. What you are allowed to do should not be questioned. You know, as long as you are not offending anyone.
Not one crime was committed.
Absolutely.
Remarkable.
No crime was committed. And I mean, look, I touched on the Southport attacks earlier on. You know, when the Southport attack, when those 3 girls were murdered, why did the far right and the people of this country feel the need to go around smashing up police vans and attacking officers and attacking places of worship and so on? What made that okay? You know, we were threatened by a man called Nick whatever his name is. But anyway, we were targeted by this guy, you know, who said he wants to come on a holy war. So we stood firm at home. You know, we didn't go out looking for trouble.
Yeah.
And I think when you poke at something that doesn't actually exist, that's a problem.
You guys have worked tirelessly, and I think I thank the wider community and everyone that turned up and everyone that supported us. And I want to reiterate, we haven't got the problem. You've got the problem with us. We're trying to make a living for ourselves and our respective communities. And it's as a brother Shukra said, we live in a very diverse, multicultural community, and more so, if you want to learn about Islam, it heavily emphasizes and advocates taking care of your neighbor, taking care of those that are not from yourself. And manners, as was demonstrated in the march, is at an utmost paramount for us. Unfortunately, there are a few criticisms that I have to address, and I want your take on it. So you addressed the one about the balaclavas, both of you did extensively. There's two others. One of them was there was a young, naive boy that made some TikTok videos about we're taking over. Can you guys address that?
Well, I'll touch on it a little bit. And I don't want to sensationalize it because to me, watching that video is satire. You know, a young man saying, okay, you're saying that I am here to take over your country. Yes, I am. I'm here to implement Sharia law. That's exactly what we're going to do. That video was satire. And the fact that there's a spin-off throughout media, well, I think irrelevant media, because I don't think BBC would produce something like that or Sky News would produce something like that. I say that lightly. But I think when you turn satire and sensationalize it for your audience, and that's what it was to target a specific audience, because a person that's intelligent enough will understand that actually what person in their right mind, you know, will come out and say, we're here to take over your country and we're here for Sharia law. You know, I don't think that was the case. I think it was a young person that made comments out of frustration, really. Thought, all right.
Not to mention his age, naive, immaturity.
Absolutely.
And the perspective that I portrayed earlier on, he was born here. He's as entitled as every other man in this country. He doesn't see the struggles that Shukrbai, or perhaps you, maybe even me to some extent, went through.
And I think we touched on a little bit, you know, what's legal and what isn't.
Yeah.
You know, what has he said that's illegal? That's number one. But the other point is, you know, it wasn't illegal, and actually he didn't even mean it in a way where it was to offend people. It was to play into what the far right say about him and
Sarcasm.
the rest of us.
Yeah, I think I've got to just quickly add to that. I think it's complete stupidity for anybody to want to take that seriously. The only person or only people who would take something like that seriously and want to act on it or try and make something out of it are completely silly. And the reason why I say that is, let's go back to statistics. 68 million population here in the UK, 4 million in terms of all of the Muslims combined. That includes the Bangladeshis and all the other ethnic makeup, including white revert Muslims. 4 million. 4 million Muslims are going to take over a population of 64 million. 4 taking on 64 to make up the 68, right? And implement Sharia and this, that, and the other. Anybody who says that, it's either two ways to look at it. Either this guy's completely delusional, he needs to be sat down and spoken to, or you laugh it off. You can't take something like that seriously. And if you do, then I'd like to hear my friends from the right-wing sector, you know, the right-wingers, and those that sympathise with the right wing, I'd like to hear you come out and say something about Nick Tenkoni's disgusting, you know, declaration of holy war against Muslims. Our Jewish friends, we were in a wider steering committee. We had Jewish friends there, members from the Jewish community. We had members from the church, a faith community, Christians. But we didn't see anybody else come out and condemn, saying, well, no, Nick Tenkoni's on his own. We don't play to that. That's not what we're about. If you've got serious issues with this community, let's talk about it. Don't fall into this, you know, narrow-minded, deliberately designed sort of sound bites to agitate, to excite people in the wrong way. Don't. And knowledge is key. And I say this to myself and to everybody else. Knowledge is key. So especially to those that may say, well, we're not right-wing, but I can see the point. You know, there is no point. What is it about Muslims that you don't like? Ask yourself that. Make a list and go visit one of your local mosques and try and find out about this religion. It is actually one of the most peaceful religions in the world. And if you look at facts and data, more Muslims are being killed globally every single day than any other faith community in the world. That is a fact. So please, just everybody really, let's just get, things are hard. There's a lot we all have in common. And it goes back to the point the brother made about classism. And there is, political elitists have hijacked the agenda, no doubt. Now, what a young, poor white person in a remote council estate up north somewhere is experiencing, the choice between heating or eating, whether to buy food for themselves and put food on the table or to switch the heating on for an extra hour, are also issues that a Muslim in Tower Hamlets, brown-skinned person, is also having to contend with. We have more in common than you think. Don't let those smart, intelligent, highly funded bigots make a living out of your misery and making an absolute killing by creating further division based on hatred. Follow the money trail. Where is all this being funded from? And I'm disgusted by our government. Elon Musk in central London does a live telecast asking people, our nation, to go up in arms, and our government remains silent. Our government allows hate preachers to enter the UK, take centre stage in Uniting the Kingdom event, and they allowed them to talk. Where was your conscience then? So it's a complete dereliction of duties, morals, everything you talk about, everything you can think about. So everything we are now facing is as a consequence of some people's inaction. So we all need to really, all of us, Muslims, Christians, Jews, pink, black, white, yellow, we all really need to follow what is going on and really ask ourselves, are we puppets on a string? Are we parroting somebody else's lines? Are we really smart enough to be able to deal with our problems? Or are we just creating more problems for ourselves in terms of our everyday struggles just by diverting the problem or looking at the other, the one who looks different to us, the one who prays different to me, the one who dreads? Are we scapegoating other communities?
Well,
Because if
sure,
we are, then we're not solving our problems, really.
I wanted to say, I think you touched on it a little bit in terms of the government and them staying quiet when Elon Musk came in, the richest man in the world, coming and saying that you know you've got to rise up and you've got to fight this. He was inciting hatred and violence and so on. But our government isn't innocent in this. You know, it was actually the Prime Minister himself prior to the last election, prior to the general election. He was talking about deportations and having a stance on immigrants and migrants and so on. And he specifically targeted the Bangladeshi community. He specifically named, it was a Labour, you know, it was our now Labour government.
A week before the general election.
A week before the general election,
Yeah,
he said that he would need to deport Bangladeshi migrants. That sets the pace of where we're going. That sets the narrative. And when you have a government that's in power that is supposed to be sort of left wing or even centrist left, let's say, who are trying to woo reform voters, because let's face it, they're absolutely petrified of reform, right? And I think the Labour government had realised that prior to the general election, you know, prior to winning, and I think that's the kind of tone that they set, the precedents that they set, and this has been going on. So when he's talking about being tough on migration, tough on this, and I'll want to send them back. Just this morning, I was reading about the largest ever crackdown on, you know, migrant workers and so on. And you know, when you have a government that says things like that, obviously there are going to be others, these far right splinters like Reform and so on, these weasels that are going to come out and going to try and compete with that kind of rhetoric. So the government isn't innocent in this. The Labour Party definitely isn't innocent in this. And I think prior to the election, the tone that was taking place, the tone that's been taking place throughout the year, has set a tone for it. And I think when you have a government in place that says those kind of things, but then banks on ethnic votes, then banks on communities, you will feed, you know, this poison at your own ease and at your own pace.
You're right. And again, I don't want to miss this point. And if you think about the Prime Minister and the government, and then if you look at the local level, I genuinely believe a lot of the criticism that's coming from within the community, trying to criticize our young people, if you really look carefully, you'll see, I've seen some of the posts, and they're declaring which party, the political party they belong to. So what they're actually doing, and this is disgusting, it really is, and it really, really boils my blood. You are politicizing an offence, a serious threat to this community, where far-right elements were threatening to walk through our community on a...
It's not just our community.
This community.
It's everyone's community.
Into Tower Hamlets.
Yeah.
This community, walked through this community, what they called or termed a crusade. And then you have sections within this community who are politicizing it. I understand certain political actors will be involved in the process. Naturally, that's the de facto position. If we talk about authorities, if we talk about police, law enforcement, then naturally those are two key elements, statutory elements that are needed to be able to host or even govern an event like this. So that's the de facto political position. Anything outside of that, any involvement outside of that, I would say is being politically kind of perpetuated, but there wasn't. So these people are desperate to make this into a political thing, and now they're talking about things like footwear during prayers. Where were you when bombs were being dropped on our mothers and women in Gaza? When women were giving birth to fetuses, dead fetuses? And you told the party line then, but now all of a sudden you want to teach me my religion? And even that you've got wrong. You've gone as far as saying if you don't wear a topi and a kurta, then your salah is invalid. So, guys, where are you going with all of this? Behave yourselves. Before the horse bolts out of the stable, behave yourselves.
Beautiful analogy. Just going on back to that, because that was one of the criticisms that we prayed outside the masjid on the roads, even though there was a masjid.
Yeah. So I think there was a masjid there, and of course it's a demonstration. The roads are blocked off. People are praying at different segments throughout the time, not specifically the time of the Jama'ah or maybe prior to the Jama'ah. So I think it had to be done as a coordination amongst us. And that was part of the coordination. You know, some did pray in the masjid. You know, I'm not saying that no one prayed in the masjid. Some prayed, you know, after Salah was done. And the group that did, you know, there were two groups that had to pray prior and post Jama'ah time, because there were so many people on the road. And actually, it was part of our structure and our organization to say, actually, not everyone going to the masjid together, because we are here to protest. We're here to show the far right that actually, if you enter our streets, we're here. You know, we're praying here. The roads are closed off. The roads being closed off doesn't, you know, it doesn't stop us from praying on the road. You know, and actually our, friends and family that were taking part in the protest, you know, men, women, and children, they actually stopped their procession for the young people to pray, but the cameras didn't record that people had stopped the procession and people had stopped their banners, and actually people had circled around to make sure that these guys can pray in peace. Music stopped and all sorts stopped because people were praying. So it was accepted by everyone that was there. Those that don't accept it are those that didn't come. You know, obviously I expect this from the far right. You know, oh my God, look at them, you know, because it fits their narrative. Some of the media, some of the independent Bangladeshi journalists out there, what narrative are they fitting?
Very disappointing. And just, you know, the irony in all of this, we sought consent from the police whether it'd be okay, even though the roads were closed off. We didn't just take advantage of that. When we talk about coordination, you know, let's accept that it was a perfectly managed event. And I go by the outcome. The proof is in the pudding. No incidents, no arrests, etc. It's because of this constant, up-to-the-minute, regular liaison with the police. We went as far as asking the police, is it okay? And they allowed us to pray. Otherwise, we would have continued all the way to Al Tawali Park. And the other reason why, there was one team that had to constantly secure the perimeter of the mosque, because from past experience, there's a lot of, I'm glad we're touching on criticism. Some are saying, well, if the UKIP was banned from coming, then why did we come out? Because we know from experience, those of us that have been around in this community dealing with these threats for the past 4 decades or longer, we know, despite the police saying, don't come, they come. And we know from experience, because police intelligence is fluid. If there's a team of police in central London and another team locally stationed, they're sharing information on what's going on. The local police, and we believe this genuinely, if we hadn't come out, then there would have been attempts to come in and cause small-scale skirmishes. And that's a chance we weren't prepared to
They're
take.
little wins, aren't they?
Yeah. For them, that's all it is, small gains. And we didn't want to take any chances. So at all times, the mosque was also protected. There was a perimeter around the mosque at all times. So what was supposed to be a really well-organized event, instead of getting any credit, and forget the credit, we don't do things for credit, but please don't dishearten our young people. Some of these young men sacrifice their weekend jobs. I know. They sacrifice their weekend jobs to turn up. And that's the only bit of money that they have to survive throughout the whole week. I know some young man, one young person delayed his nikah. Him and his boys of about 100, they delayed their nikah until the evening.
Congratulations to him.
Yeah, congratulations to him. But these are real sacrifices our young people have made. For who? For whose safety?
And I think, Sugarboy, you touched on the point about splint groups turning up when they're banned and not coming. But I think what UKIP and Nick Coney did quite well. I think he thought he was being clever, but he made a call out to all far right patriots that have got platforms. So whether that was Reform, whether that was the old EDL or United Kingdom or whoever, he made a call out to them. So in his mind, I don't think technically they fit the UKIP ban, so they could potentially still turn up. And I think we produced a statement earlier on because we know they are in cahoots locally, nationally. Just this summer, actually, we saw the issue around migrant hotels and so on, and it really brings out the racists that live amongst us in the community. And I don't say that lightly. Just over the last few days, I've been watching posts on local community pages and stuff that are talking about, what happened on Saturday. And they're all coming out from under that little rock that they've been living under with this false sense of security. Do you really think with those kind of views, you'll be able to walk around this borough? Because we won't allow it. We will shut it down. We're a diverse community. We live amongst everyone. You bring in the hate, we will rise against you. But beyond that point, touching back on the migrant hotel crisis, as they call it, it's the same pattern. It's a lot of scaremongering, So there was one man about a month or two ago that said, "Oh, there was a rape in Canary Wharf, and it was a migrant." And, people asked him, "No, where did you get that information from?" "Oh, because the police barricaded the hotel outside the next day." "I just know, bruv." Okay, you just know, bruv.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's what we're dealing with, we're dealing with lots of numbnuts in the area.
Yeah.
Anyway.
We're going to wrap up here. I want to thank you personally for organising this, and the wider committee member and everyone else in Hamlets that did turn up. And I just want to say personally, shame on the criticism internally from within. Like I said, and I double down on this. If they did turn up, you wouldn't have been seen, and you would have run away. Cowards. Shukr, last final words from you, if there's any.
I think I do want to put a message out to our young people. Honestly, ignore the criticism, you guys. And history will remember this, and I know social scientists and academics will look back at this chapter and they will want to know, and possibly, and I hope, they will use this as a textbook example of how a perfect protest is conducted against all the hatred, all the division, despite all the rage. You showed calm, you showed restraint, you showed respect, and above all, you showed that Tower Hamlets is a place for all people that embrace all people. So thank you and keep it up.
Beautiful. Lastly from
Yeah,
yourself.
I just want to say, I think we're a place that has gone through resistance throughout the years, throughout the decades, actually, since the arrival of our forefathers to us, and that resistance will long continue, and as long as that there are, people within our community like us and like others that pass down the stories, I think that resistance will continue, and I think it's about learning about where we come from and being in touch with our roots and our existence in this country, and what we've suffered. I think, touching what Shukobe said, is a massive thank you to all the people that turned out. The young people, the men, the women, the children, and sort of all the other sort of organising committees. Because obviously we were one aspect of an organising committee, but there was there were different groups that held a umbrella organisation. So thank you to all our friends that had done that for us. And I think we will continue to resist. You try it again, we will be better and stronger every time. That video that we saw, we're not worried about people like that, whatever his name is. And let's stick to what we're doing.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Next week, we'll have another episode continuing on this theme, and we'll get on perhaps even Shukurbai, actually. I'm going to ask you if you can come on. Next week, we're going to have people that grew up in the 70s, 80s and 90s, and to really understand the sort of racism that they endured throughout the years. Like I said, a lot of us grew up here entitled, we didn't experience racism at all, but our elders and our predecessors did. And we want to really, since we're on this topic, really understand what it is that they had to endure in order for us to be where we are now. So again, a big thank you to the committee, to these two brothers that have organised it, and the wider committee. A big thank you to all the members of Hamlets that did turn up peacefully. A big thank you to the wider country from Leicester, Newham and further afield in London that did turn up. And just a quick message to the far, far right. And I know, listen, in every country there's a spectrum. You have the mid, left, right. We're not talking to you. We're talking about the extreme far right. They're extremely uneducated, unhappy and probably broke as well. It's those people that we're worried about, because it's those people that are not going to come and harm us. They're going to come and harm women folk. We haven't gone out and been violent. That we haven't had any skirmishes. So I'll leave you on that note, and I'll see you next week. Again, thank you. And yeah, anytime. That was what the intro was. Anytime. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.